So I'm going to speak about my reflections on programming, which was the Unit 3 module. If I can get this to work. Right, so I think the first thing to say is, just as important as the very carefully curated course materials that we enjoyed were the discussions that we had in our groups as parts of Sprints 1 and 2. Our groups comprised a mix of skills and backgrounds which could each bring a different perspective to the project. As one can see from the slide, we're all based in the UK, which eliminated much of the time zone issues that can occur with remote working. We are all, however, engaged in full-time work alongside the course, which meant that asynchronous communication on Slack was very important in delivering the final product. We were asked to work as self-contained teams in which the labour was divided based on skill set, with the most confident programmers delivering much of the actual code, and the newbies, such as myself, being allocated less intensive tasks such as testing the code. The work of the group was marshalled very effectively by our team leader, Beverly, who tried her very best to get all members involved, as well as to drive the team past sticking points. While much of the work was conducted on Slack, the summary level output was recorded on GitHub. So my user story was that of a dermatologist who takes electronic referrals from within the hospital. So I need to take this referral information, annotate it with how quickly I need to see the patient, as well as the plan after seeing the patient. This might mean admitting the patient to hospital, seeing them as an outpatient, or if the issue is a bit more straightforward, perhaps discharging straight back to the GP. This information needs to be stored in JSON format for record-keeping purposes, and might be used in case of, for example, needing it for audit purposes. So as an NHS clinician with very little experience of programming, the course was a very steep learning curve, but I was actively supported by the course director and teaching assistants. So we used Python, which is a widely used object-oriented, interpreted flexible language for which a wide variety of tools to perform bioinformatic analyses have already been produced. To expand on this a little, an object-oriented language is a programming paradigm in which programmers define the data type of a data structure and also the types of operations or functions that can be applied to the data structure. This is a significant evolution from its predecessor, procedural programming, which often led to major issues with interdependency. So I think, one of the main things that became, abundantly clear very early on from the course is that one doesn't actually need to be able to produce very much independent code straight off the bat. Rather, there's an army of very clever and dedicated developers who've done much of the work already, and I think it's more of a case of actually being able to harness that work. Speaking for myself, I learned a lot from speaking with classmates on the course who are perhaps a bit more experienced. But equally, I found YouTube videos by experienced programmers such as Mosh Hamidani, you see there, to be invaluable. Furthermore, we were encouraged to pursue learning out with of the confines of the course, and having ventured into Stack Overflow, this is a resource that I think I'll continue to use even once the course is complete. As we discussed in our introductory weeks, there are two main approaches to programming tasks, Agile and Waterfall. Agile is very much in vogue at present, and there are many who seemingly espouse Agile approaches, but don't actually truly understand or implement it appropriately. In essence, the success of the approach is very much dependent on how it's deployed, and it's more than simply just a buzzword. The course materials in our Jupyter notebooks cover the difference between Agile and Waterfall very nicely and comprehensively. Essentially, from my perspective, it seems that, as the name suggests, Agile is a more agile choice, which is responsive and versatile. It seems that the nature of the process enables constant improvement and can respond rapidly to changing requirements. It's probably better suited for projects involving smaller teams that can speak informally and are readily accessible to one another. Case in point, so I work as a dermatologist in a medium-sized district general hospital. Problems that are intra-departmental, such as booking systems for minor surgery appointments, might be best managed via Agile. For example, the key stakeholders, which might be clinicians and administrators, actually sit within the same office corridor. I might have an issue with the method by which minor surgery is prioritized, but I can have this discussion with colleagues to establish a better triage system. And I think that method of working and communication works quite well. Agile is an iterative approach in which there's a constant cycle of design, testing, and improvement. While this is a fast and dynamic approach, it can be dangerous in scenarios where the product must work straight out of the box. In my user story, where referral information must be taken and acted upon appropriately, errors such as losing information from the referrer or failing to store it appropriately can create major clinical governance issues. In contrast to the clunky nature of collaborative work with which I've engaged in the past, the version control options enabled by Git mean that multiple members of the team can work on individual branches without interfering with the source code. This is especially important in larger projects, but is still important in individual work, since if a later version doesn't work as expected, one can always revert back to the previous iteration. We were also introduced to the utility of debugging using PyCharm. This is an integrated development environment which enables developers to run, debug, and test their code. This works by placing breakpoints in the code at which point the program execution is suspended, thereby enabling the programmer to see at what point the issues are developing and occurring at. In previous modules, we were introduced to the concept of interoperability. In the same vein, we need to speak a common language in order to be able to collaborate appropriately. There are a whole host of standards which, in the interest of brevity, we can't get into. However, the key points which I do want to raise are the JSON format and PEP8. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation and is an open standard file format that uses human-readable text to transmit data objects. It's very versatile and is a language-independent format. Additionally, we were shown the importance of writing PEP8 compliant code. This is incredibly important so that others can readily access your code and understand what's going on. This has a meaningful impact because somebody more experienced can comment on it if they can understand it and maybe give you some really good feedback that you could take forward. So I spent quite some time writing the code and wrote it in small chunks so that the individual components functioned. I had to read the course materials in detail to understand about JSON format, exceptions, and error handling. The application broadly worked as I hoped it would and was shared via GitHub. Once I'd completed the code, I created a branch on GitHub and committed the code to the branch where it could be viewed by colleagues. In order to deploy this code in the real-world setting, I'd need to make sure that I had a means of communicating back to the referrer, as it would be dangerous if they did not know that their patient had been seen and had been given a plan. Furthermore, there would need to be robust safeguards to ensure that patient identifiers were stored securely and accessible only by those intended. This might require password protection and encryption, which is slightly beyond my expertise at present. So I think, bringing this all together, all in all, I've really enjoyed my introduction to programming. The course directors and teaching assistants have been excellent and proactive in getting me past, all manner of snags, and I'm, truly very grateful. Without their help, I don't think I'd have been able to complete the module and, to have derived as much learning as I feel I have. I think, I have to be very honest, and I can't claim to be any good at this point. But I think the key thing is that this course has given me the tools to keep chipping away. So for that, I'm very grateful, and thank you very much. And I think that will do it for me. Right, here we go.